You're watching Reality Check. We are in Goa because Goa is on the boil. It started off as protests with the hashtag Save Mollem, a movement against a road, a railway track and a power line which many believed is going to damage Goa's pristine forests. But now it's snowballed into something more. Rising public anger against what many believe is an attempt to turn Goa into a hub for coal. Now, to understand the anatomy of these protests, one needs to first study their geography. So let's put that up on the screen for you to explain to you where these protests are playing out. Now, all these three projects, the road, the rail and the power line, fall in the same area along the Goa-Karnataka border. The most contentious of which is the double tracking of a railway line that mainly carries imported coal from Goa's Mormugao port to power and steel plants in northern Karnataka. That's the journey that it takes. This line passes through dense forest sanctuaries that straddle the Goa-Karnataka border, the Mollem National Park and the Bhagwan Mahavir Forest Sanctuary. The widening of the Goa-Karnataka National Highway, which is also being objected to, also passes through the same forest. And finally, there's a new power transmission line at the northeast corner of the forest. So that's the landscape and that's the geography of these protests which have kept Goa on the boil. Now, as the protests have intensified, the government has been pushed on the defensive. They've issued clarification after clarification. They've done U-turns. They've tried to deflect. But the protesters aren't convinced. In fact, as you'll see, the protests have only intensified. Enter Goa and you will see this almost every day in one of its towns or villages. This latest march on Sunday evening in Panjim, the chants against coal. And against the corporates protesters believe are being favored. The trigger for the unrest traces its way back here to Goa's Mormugao port, where the surge in coal imports is visible. The coal mainly brought in by Jindal Steel for its steel plants in Karnataka and by Adani for its plants and to supply Jindal. Currently, Mormugao can handle about 10 million tons of coal every year. The Goa government claims they will cap imports to about the same capacity. But as activists point out in a report of the centre's Sagarmala port scheme, Mormugao is projected to handle about 51 million tons in the next 15 years. Sherwin Correa is a young lawyer and resident of the town of Vasco, near the port. So we have now come to a point where we can actually look at where the journey of the contentious coal begins in Goa, and that is an overview of the Mormugao port in Goa. And this is where the coal is actually brought in ships from countries like Australia and Indonesia and then shipped out. And Sherwin Correa is with us, a young law student who's been quite active in all of this. Now Sherwin, first just tell us, what is it that we can see here? These are the berths, is that right?
Yes.
Where the coal is being brought?
Yes, this is Adani's.
This is Adani's.
And that 5A and 6A is Jindal's berth.
Okay.
Yes.
And these are what, dedicated berths?
Dedicated coal berths, yes.
Dedicated coal berths. And we can actually see some of the coal.
Yes, right there.
Stacked.
Over there. They just dump it like that. Actually, it's not supposed to happen that way.
Okay, it's not supposed to be dumped there.
Yes, but they just for the ships to have a quick turnaround, they just dump it there and they leave it.
It's supposed to be, isn't it supposed to be covered? I mean, some of it is covered.
It's supposed to be covered, yes, but they haven't.
Not.
They haven't. And then what happens is the breeze carries that dust and it goes right into the city there.
Okay, that is the city of...
Yes, Vasco da Gama.
That's the city of Vasco over there.
Yes.
We are shown these images of the impact of coal dust in the town of Vasco. This is even before the coal imports are going to scale up. I believe you
Yes.
yourself
Yes.
have been affected. What?
So as a child, I always had these respiratory issues like cold, cough, and many other kids like me also around my age also had the same problem, and I realized that it is because of the coal dust, because even my brother now, who's around 9 years old, he also has the same problems. The same thing what is happening to me is happening to him also.
What's the fear here that at the moment these are the berths, as you mentioned, Adani, JSW Jindal, where the coal is coming in, and now the plan is to expand.
Exactly. So with the Sagarmala project, they envisage around almost 50 MMTPA, that is million metric tons per annum, at the port, and that is going to be dangerous because right now they handle I think almost 10 million, 10 point something, and if it goes up to 51 million, it's going to be like doomsday for all of us in Vasco. It's like a ticking time bomb.
Close to 2 hours east of Mormugao port, the railway station at Mollem, on the edges of the Mollem National Park. Every other hour, a train arrives bearing coal on its way to Karnataka. So this is typical of what one gets to see in this part of Goa. This is a train loaded with coal passing through Mollem, going from Goa into Karnataka, and they're fully heaped. The tarpaulin is bulging and the trains are moving through. And this is the flashpoint. The fear is that this train, which is passing on a single track, cutting through forest already, when the track widens, is going to devastate even more of the forest. And the other fear, of course, is that the coal, more coal you transport, is going to pollute the areas around where these trains pass through, as well as spillage. Because of these heaped trains, coal will start to fall on the sides, and that is why people are on the streets. Julio Aguilar is an engineer turned activist who spots coal on the tracks. So as we're walking along these tracks near Mollem, Julio here has found pieces of, Julio, this is...
Yeah, this is coal.
This is
which
coal.
Is being imported.
Right, which has fallen off the...
It's fallen off the wagons.
And the worry is that it falls off the train. I mean, ideally it's supposed to be, the trains are supposed to be fully covered,
Yes.
and coal is not supposed to
That's
fall
right.
off. But that does happen.
That does happen. And if one would walk along the track, would be in a position to go home with a sack full of coal.
So, if these tracks are doubled, so will the coal trains. But don't link coal and the double tracking, the Chief Minister has said. But the Sagarmala report talks of how doubling of the railway line has to be completed in order to improve Mormugao port's evacuation capacity. Moreover, as these documents show, in 2013, Goa's then Chief Wildlife Warden rejected the proposal for double tracking, saying it will hurt the fragile ecosystem of the forest. The then Chief Minister Manohar Parrikar agreed with the warden. But after the railways promised to alter the alignment of the tracks, successive governments, first of Chief Ministers Parsekar and of Pramod Sawant, cleared the projects, claiming it's in the public interest. As the Indian Express pointed out, this despite many members of Goa's Wildlife Board raising serious concerns. Santosh Kumar is Goa's current Wildlife Warden. What has changed that you gave it your go-ahead?
No, it's not correct fact. Our predecessor, Mr. Ajay Saxena, was there and he's never rejected it. In fact, this project of doubling of the track was put up in 2016 and 2017 meeting of the State Board
No,
of
I meant
Wildlife.
in 2013 the Chief Wildlife Warden, he rejected it.
2030?
2013. 2013. Mr. Richard D'Souza, who was the then Chief Wildlife Warden.
I don't think this came up in 2013 as far as I know.
2013 it was rejected. We have the documents as well. At that time, Mr. Richard D'Souza wrote that the project was rejected because it would endanger the wildlife in the forest.
I am not aware. If you are saying that, I have to check my record. But
Right.
as far as I know, in 2018, 16 and 17, when this railway approached, They wanted a track in a different route so as to have a slower gradient, and so it was decided that no, we cannot allow the defragmentation of the wildlife habitat.
Right.
So it has to be parallel to the present track already existing.
But when you say the State Wildlife Board cleared it, as you must be aware, several members of the board have come on record to say that their suggestions, their concerns were not taken on board.
No, there are few people who raised the issue and it was explained there at that time, and then the board took a final call, and based on that it has gone to National Board of Wildlife. Even the National Board of Wildlife has cleared it.
Under the Wildlife Act, as you know, projects are only cleared which has benefit to wildlife.
That is again a misconception.
What is the benefit to the wildlife
I would
here?
again say please go through the act.
Okay.
This is being raised by many people, it is not like that.
Okay.
If it is beneficial, if any action is beneficial for the wildlife, Chief Wildlife Warden is authorized to take action. There is no need to go to State Board of Wildlife or National Board of Wildlife.
So what is the beneficial, what is beneficial to the wildlife?
Since it is not primarily meant for benefits of the wildlife, that is why there is a provision in the law that if you want to take any non-forestry activity in the wildlife sanctuary, you have to obtain approval of the National Board of Wildlife, and before that you have to obtain the approval of the State Board of Wildlife. So we cannot say that this project is for the benefits of the wildlife.
So this project is not for the benefit of wildlife.
It is not intended to be benefited for the wildlife. It is for the double tracking of the railway.
Monkeys frolic on National Highway 4 that runs from Panjim to Belgavi in Karnataka. Their presence a reminder of how the highway runs along and through dense forests. Now the move to widen the highway has quite literally brought locals onto the road. Like Mr. Khandar Parkar.
I'm a local person.
Local person of Mollem.
I'm a retired headmaster of the high school.
Retired headmaster of the high school. Once again, the government's claims that the plans to widen highway is not linked to coal is challenged by its own report, which says a 4-lane highway with an elevated portion has been planned for the faster evacuation of cargo.
This is the wildlife sanctuary which was funded by World Wildlife Fund. The pumps of crores of rupees have been pumped by the World Wildlife Fund, and this is a protected area. UNESCO has recognized this. This is a part of Western Ghats, so it has very more importance.
Towards the end of last year, chainsaws cleared a dense patch of trees in Sangod on the edges of Mollem National Park to make way for a power substation. The cutting was done as part of Tanmar project owned by the Vedanta company Sterlite, meant to bring a 400 kV line into Goa. It was an early indication to locals of what was to come. Tell us, what is your objection to these trees being cut? Because the government can turn around and say, we are building this substation, we've got the permission, so what's wrong?
Yeah, so let me give a little bit of background actually. So I grew up adjacent to this area. Where I live is just 500 meters from this region. So the first thing is, as a villager or as a nearby living person, we didn't had any information about cutting these trees a priori.
Okay.
So just one fine day we just came here and find out this much land is cut, and to be precise, the figure is around 1,72,000 square meter area.
The trees have been felled during the lockdown period.
Okay, how many trees have been felled?
Approximately 2,600 trees have been felled.
A power line already passes through the park. Now a new bigger one might be on the way. Government documents accessed by NDTV claim the new power line will cater to Goa's growing demands. But once again, the government's explanations are being challenged. Julia, what do you make of the argument that the government is giving that this power line is needed because Goa needs that extra power?
Well, the Power Minister Nilesh Kabral has gone on record last year that the state receives 1,000 megawatts, out of which we have 400 megawatts surplus.
Okay.
So when we have 400 megawatt surplus and Government of India is signatory to climate change and sustainable energy, we don't see the need for bringing so much of power in Goa. Our yearly requirements are about 4 to 6% in a year, and that could be availed by putting up sustainable energy in the form of solar power stations.
As protests mounted after the trees were found cut, work has stopped for now. There seems to be a kind of stoppage of work here.
Yes.
Has work stopped here now?
Yes, work has stopped because there was a petition filed by Goa Foundation and it is in court.
So at the moment, Tamnar, which is this company,
Yes.
private company which is doing the power project,
Correct.
the work has stopped now.
Work has stopped from 1st of December.
I see.
From November last, sorry.
From last
Yeah.
November. Now it's important to remember that of all the projects that have brought Goans onto the streets, where we are is the only site where there actually has been the cutting of trees. And this is a site at the edge of the Mollem forest range. And here we can see around us thousands of trees that have been cut by the authorities that are lying here on the side. This forest area has been cleared. And this is to make place for an electricity substation. That's part of an attempt to expand the power lines, the power capacity that's coming into Goa. And it is these images, this impact, which activists fear will be the fate of the forest if all the other projects are allowed to go ahead. Mr. Pramod Sawant is here with me, sir. Thank you so much for talking to us. Now, you've been, sir, basically saying that all these protest agitation that is going on Mollem, that people should not fear that Goa is becoming a coal hub. But they keep pointing to the fact that the government's own projections and reports, like the Sagarmala report, is saying that there is a projection for increasing the amount of coal being imported into Goa. So then, how would you say that it is not becoming a coal hub?
मैं आपको पहले एक बात बता देता हूँ पहले जो तीनों प्रोजेक्ट हैं विच इज द डिफरेंट प्रोजेक्ट्स द टमनार प्रोजेक्ट इज डिफरेंट इलेक्ट्रिसिटी टमनार विच इज द इलेक्ट्रिसिटी प्रोजेक्ट नेशनल हाईवे की तो अभी बात ही नहीं है विच इज एन फ्यूचर प्लानिंग प्रोजेक्ट थर्ड थिंग इज अबाउट द डबल ट्रैकिंग ऑफ द रेल और उसका तो काम उसका जहाँ पे पॉसिबल है वो काम चालू है कोल की बात ही अलग है द कोल के लिए इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर नहीं है द सम पीपल आर रिलेटेड दिस फॉर द कोल वी आर डूइंग दैट वी आर नॉट फॉर द कोल
The double tracking is not for coal.
It is not for coal. It is not for coal at all.
But the Sagarmala report itself says that it is for coal.
I'm coming to the Sagarmala. Sagarmala project में जो 4-5 suggestions दी थे उसमें से चार प्रोजेक्ट जो हैं वो 4 प्रोजेक्ट यहाँ पे it is not possible उनके the MPT have sent the letter to the
MPT is Morguma Port Trust.
MPT had sent a letter to the shipping ministry. The Sagarmala project के consultant ने जो 4 प्रोजेक्ट सजेस्ट किए हैं which is not possible at all बोल के लेटर भी ऑलरेडी भेज चुके हैं तो इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि एखाद्या कंसल्टेंट ने प्रोजेक्ट बता के दे दिए तो वो प्रोजेक्ट होने वाले ऐसा नहीं है इसलिए हम बोल रहे हैं at present I had given the instruction for our Goa Pollution Control Board to go and visit and recheck the quantity which is given by the permission which is given the EC which is given by the Pollution Control Board उसके ऊपर रीचेक करो पोल्यूशन कितना होता है वो देखो और उसका रिपोर्ट विद इन 8 डेज सबमिट करो इसलिए एंड सभी लोगों का कंसर्न है कोल के बारे में हम चाहते हैं कि अदर कम्युनिटीज के बारे में हम एमपीटी के पोर्ट पे हम सोच रहे हैं और डेफिनेटली हम अदर कम्युनिटीज के बारे में जब हमें कुछ मिल जाए तो हम 50% ऑफ द कोल वी आर रिड्यूसिंग
You will reduce the amount of coal imported into Mormugao by 50%.
Yes, we are reducing the coal to the 50%.
By when, sir?
We are studying the matter. It will take some time.
But if the double tracking is not for coal, sir, then what is it for? Why do you need the double tracking?
The double tracking मैं फिर से बोल रहा हूँ कोल के लिए नहीं है
हाँ, तो किसके लिए?
अदर कम्युनिटीज जो भी ट्रेन से यहाँ आ सकता है कल आयन और आ सकता है टूरिज्म पर्पज आ सकता है फॉर द पैसेंजर ट्रेन आ सकते हैं अदर कम्युनिटीज के लिए यहाँ पे ढेर सारी चीज के लिए हम यूज कर सकते हैं इट इज अ नेशनल प्रोजेक्ट इट इज नॉट प्रिपेयरिंग फॉर द स्पेसिफिक थिंग्स I'm telling you.
No, I'm only asking, sir, because the double tracking was earlier rejected by Mr. Parikar himself because the fear is that it was going to create environmental damage.
No. So Mr. Parikar has never rejected this project. मैं बता देता हूँ उन्होंने ये प्रोजेक्ट कभी रिजेक्ट नहीं किया.
But his signature is there on the chief wildlife warden had rejected it and he gave his assent to it. His comment is there on record also.
Not at all. लोगों का जो कंसर्न था वो कंसर्न के बारे में उन्होंने लिखा था जहाँ पे कुछ अकोमोडेट करके कम कर सकते हैं डबल ट्रेन कुछ लोगों के सपोज किन लोगों के घर जाते हैं तो वहाँ कुछ हम सब एडजस्ट कर सकते हैं तो उसके बारे में उन्होंने लिखा.
But don't you fear that they will cause environmental damage? I mean, even if you are importing other commodities, you are double tracking through a reserved forest, through a very, very fragile ecosystem.
जहाँ पे already our environment minister have visited that track. He had particularly he have gone through on that track. So He'll tell you exactly what is the concern of the people.
Will this politically damage you? Are you worried that it may be a political damage to you at all?
Not at all.
Okay, Goa Chief Minister there. Now, we also reached out to Adani and Jindal Southwest. Adani sent us a following statement on these protests over the import of coal. They said that they don't import, own or use coal at Mormugao port. They provide port handling services to customers who use the coal for their consumption. And that the allegations that Adani is putting pressure on the government to fast-track these projects is baseless. Jindal Southwest has not responded to our request at the time that the show has gone to air. All right, let me get on the show Claude Alvarez, who is Goa Foundation. He's someone who is at the forefront of these protests against these projects. He's also in court. Claude Alvarez, thank you for joining me. Claude Alvarez, let me just start by first getting you to react to what you heard the Goa Chief Minister say, where now he's saying that, number one, these double tracking is not for coal of the railway line, and he's also saying we're going to cut down the amount of coal that's coming into the port by close to 50%. Claude Alvarez, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I am surprised. I've been watching your program, and I'm surprised to find that the chief wildlife warden, who was coming in 2017, does not. Yes, I can hear you.
Go ahead.
And I'm surprised to find that the chief does not know there is some. Yeah, I'm surprised to find that the chief wildlife warden, who was coming in 2016, does not know that the earlier chief wildlife warden has written a detailed note saying that this project should not go through the wildlife sanctuary. And similarly, I'm surprised to find that the present chief minister says that he does not know that the earlier chief minister had said that the project for double tracking is a scam. It's got no beneficial use for Goa at all. And therefore, he was not interested and he rejected the opportunity. So two of the principal officers are today claiming that they have not even read the files which are all in our possession. They claim that they have no idea whatsoever. Then this is a very serious state of affairs, because these are the two principal officers who are in charge of these projects. And if they say they do not know that the earlier government headed by Vasco had cancelled and refused permission for these projects, then either they are lying or they are totally incompetent as far as these issues are concerned.
Okay. So, Claude, you're not convinced, but then what is the end game here? Are you essentially saying that it doesn't matter even if the coal imports come down, there have to be no imports, you want all of this to stop, and that there's no double tracking? Do you think that's a realistic demand?
Nobody is saying that the Bagua should be closed down. Nobody is saying that. Everybody says that it employs a lot of people, and let MPT power, let them diversify, let them go into cruise tourism, let them go into everything, but let them not go to coal. When they first started with coal in the year 1999, within 1 year, these people were already in the High Court saying that we cannot bear the pollution that coal is causing the town of Vasco. At that time, it was only 1 to 2 million tons. Today, we are speaking of 10 million tons, and the pollution is unacceptable. They want now to expand the operations so that the entire south of Goa is not in coal pollution. And it is very clear that none of this is really in the interest of Goa or the Goans. It's only in interest of Karnataka. Now we love people in Karnataka, we love people in Maharashtra. All that we are saying is please support us to keep our Goa with all people.
Okay.
Clean of pollution.
Well,
so that in the past week,
right.
Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi come to Goa from Delhi. Why have they come there?
Okay.
Come because air in Goa is able to be pristine and clean.
Right,
All
Claude.
people.
Okay, we're out of time. I'd love to keep going, but I'm told we're out of time. But fighting words from you as always. Let's see how it plays out. But thank you very much indeed for joining us, Claude Alvarez. We're not moving away from the story just yet. Watch us tomorrow night as we will examine the political impact of these simmering protests in battleground Goa. Thanks for watching. Good night.